One of the hardest maps in COD Zombies history, the Darkest Shore takes no prisoners, and for that reason alone it was hated by so many fans. A completely lackluster wonder weapon, a massively frustrating Easter egg and a broken boss fight. There are many different reasons why this map was hugely controversial, but was it really all bad? If there's one thing that the WW2 Zombies universe consistently got right, it's the atmosphere of its experiences. Very much like the final right that came before it, the eerie and creepy setting of the island is one of the best things about it. All of this becomes immediately obvious as you arrive on the beach and are completely swamped by the undead. This is no normal spawn though, as the area needs to be defended, and luckily you're provided with a perfect way to do that. Although not particularly challenging, it's a great initial set piece and throws players right into this experience in an amazing way. I've got to say though that the efficient fans out there know that this is not the way to go, as it's a total waste of points, and if you're being smart you'll always make sure to be more careful about things instead. Even after this sequence, if you take the time to look around, the smaller details that help to build up the atmosphere reveal themselves, with one great example being the blood-filled water. This is not something that even needed to be there necessarily. I don't think eyebrows would have been raised if the water had looked completely normal. But it just adds a layer of quality to what is a genuinely gruesome experience, and this beach area is merely the start. As players begin to make their way through the passages of Heligoland, the sinister atmosphere just deepens, with dark hallways barely lit from small areas. A lot of the fear comes from not knowing what lurks in the darkness or around the corner, and the Darkest Shore manages to keep this theme going with the vast majority of its play space. Various corpses line the island's walls, giving fans hints to the horrors that have occurred here and tease the future dangers that players will experience. With routes all leading towards the top of the base, which shows up a lot more of the militaristic tone of the Darkest Shore. And this meshes so well with the horrific nature shown so far, because it really makes you feel like you're playing in a location where some unspeakable acts have occurred, but also in a very realistic one. And as this version of Heligoland is a mixture of the real life location and a fantastical world ravaged by Dr. Straub's undead army, it gets this so right. Over the years, many players have levelled certain criticisms at the Darkest Shore, with one of the major ones being what has been described as a pretty bland colour palette. And I won't massively disagree with that. It could certainly do with the vibrancy being turned up, or perhaps the inclusion of a few slightly different colours to differentiate certain areas from each other, but I really don't think it's enough to spoil the atmosphere of the experience, which I genuinely consider to be top tier. If players are willing to explore even further than what's immediately available to them, they can find areas which push the setting even higher with regards to its gruesome nature. The ritual chamber that fans can discover if they move forward with the map's main quest that we'll get onto later is a truly disgusting sight to behold. A fresh enemy known as Meuchler can be seen worshipping their godlike deity in a pool of blood. It's got to be one of the most incredible sights that the Darkest Shore has to offer in the most disgusting way possible. Many COD Zombies fans would agree that the Darkest Shore gets a huge amount of stuff wrong, but to me the atmosphere is definitely not one of those. It was always going to be extremely tough to reach the heights of the eerie nature of the final right, but this experience comes really close in that respect. The unnerving environment is one of the strongest parts of the first DLC in the WW2 Zombies catalogue, and although there are other major positives, this in my eyes is easily its biggest upside. But there are even more aspects of this experience which help to build the creepy environment even further. Alongside the huge returning catalogue of enemies from the final right, the Darkest Shore adds one of its craziest, creepiest and most dangerous foes yet, the Meuchler. A twisted mess of metal, limbs and speed. Outside of WW2 Zombies boss fights, there are no other enemies that come close to the devastating terror of the Meuchler. The dark beauty of this enemy comes from two very different places. The first aspect of the fear generated by this enemy is the unknown. Where is it and what's it doing? It manages to create this anxiety in two ways, by using the often disliked fog and a vent system around the map. The player is constantly wondering where the Meuchler is. Is it hiding in the fog? Has it scuttled away to some unseen location? You can hear it, but that's not enough. It always has the upper hand, and that in itself is pretty terrifying. This is only part of the problem with the Meuchler though, because when you finally have it in your sights, its attack power is pretty insane. It can absolutely decimate your health in seconds, which is not something you can say for many enemies in WW2 Zombies. The Meuchler can cause pure panic through its incredible combination of speed and strength, leading to some seriously overwhelming moments. A key aspect of its attack plan that I've already mentioned is the fog, and it's fair to say that this was not a popular mechanic when the Darkest Shore launched. Controversial take, I actually really disagree with that opinion. I think that this feature works really well in the map, taking the atmosphere to new levels of creepy and provides a much needed fresh mechanic to be used by the Meuchler. Don't get me wrong, that enemy would work perfectly fine without the fog, but it would definitely be missing a key part of what makes it feel truly unique and far more terrifying than nearly every other enemy in the series. I will say I do understand fans' frustrations with the combination of the Meuchler and the fog it shrouds itself with. It can become annoying and often pretty devastating for your armour. But I'm willing to let the negatives slide because I think it creates such a brilliantly chilling scenario on the Darkest Shore that without it the map would truly be a worse experience. There are a number of reasons that the Darkest Shore is often considered to be one of the most difficult maps in COD Zombies history, and there is no doubt that the Meuchler is one of those reasons. But I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a key component of this experience, and I think it achieves exactly what it sets out to do. Give players a hugely challenging and often nightmarish foe that they would never forget and would directly associate with this map. Not everything in the Darkest Shore is black and white though. It's not always an obvious positive or negative. Certain things exist in a much more grey area, and in my mind that is definitely the case for the map's Easter egg. Which leads me to do something that I wouldn't normally be okay with, splitting the Darkest Shore's main quest into two very separate sections. This is of course the good aspects of the experience, so let's touch on which steps are genuinely brilliant. The U-boat pen lockdown is a chaotic, unforgiving mess of a step, and I absolutely love it. This is not for the faint-hearted and requires fans to turn 3 valves, all whilst trying to avoid never-ending fire and a ridiculously overwhelming horde of enemies. Trust me, your specialist ability is very much your friend here. And the best part of the whole thing, it culminates in one of the most gruesome scenes in the franchise's history. But the amazing steps don't stop there though, as the island comes under heavy attack, and it's the players' jobs to make sure that these waves of planes don't cause Heligoland to crumble into dust. Jumping onto giant flat cannons high atop the base's walls, players have to do their best to wipe these winged enemies out of the skies, and I've gotta say it's up there with the coolest and most unique steps ever seen in a COD Zombies Easter egg. It fits the theme of the map perfectly, and although not particularly challenging, it's honestly still to this day really refreshing to see the devs try something completely different. And even this many years after the release of this massively underrated mode, there are very few main quest steps that feel as unique as this. It's not the only aspect of the Darkest Shore's Easter egg that stands out as massively original though, because the island defense doesn't end with taking down planes. Later, fans need to make use of the very visually impressive artillery cannon in order to destroy boats lurking just offshore as they attempt to bomb players into an early trip back to the lobby. Who would have thought that a game of battleships would turn into such a cool and interesting COD Zombies Easter egg step? It may not actually be that mind-blowing, involving simple changes in elevation and direction in order to use the correct aim to attack the ships, but when compared to year after year of pretty similar main quest steps, this definitely stands out as something we will sadly probably never see again. As mentioned though, not everything about this map's main quest is positive, because as players advance through the steps, it takes a pretty shambolic turn into some of the most frustrating zombies content of all time, and of course we've got to talk about that too. The Darkest Shore really is a tale of two very different stories, because as quickly as its main quest gives fans some truly top level steps, it also sadly provides players with some of the most frustrating, unbalanced ones of all time as well. In order to get hold of an extremely important item on the Darkest Shore, the Pommel of Barbarossa, players need to take part in what could well be the most ridiculous, annoying and downright maddening set of quest steps ever to grace the world of COD Zombies. As the Easter egg approaches its climax, fans are tasked with performing a number of sacrifices based on the different enemy types found in the Darkest Shore. The initial part of the process is not necessarily the major problem, with fans needing to harvest spines from certain foes. The Meuchler, however, does provide a genuine challenge with regards to getting hold of this item, but with that said, it's not unreasonable or impossible, just much harder than the others. The real problems with these sacrifice steps are how poorly balanced they are for solo players. There is little to no difference in the task from playing on your own to a squad of 4 players, and realistically that's a bit of a problem. After harvesting a whistling spine, players need to escort a friendly version of this enemy around the map in a very specific route in order to give it access to a series of perks. This may not sound like much, but when all of this needs to be done whilst being swarmed by endless zombies, it can cause some serious problems, and forget trying to hold a zombie at the end of the round to do it, because skipping to a new round is the norm for this step. Couple that with the Wustling's pathing and ability to follow the player being downright awful, and you have a quest step that can drive players to absolute madness. Particularly when it constantly goes back in the wrong direction whilst you're trying to deal with the onslaught of enemies. I appreciate it's meant to be tough, but the vast majority of the time it just seems like it wasn't very well designed at all. And unfortunately the sacrifice steps don't end there, with players also needing to follow a pest around the map to numerous locations in order to perform repeatedly perfectly timed ricochet attempts with the map's wonder weapon, which we'll get onto. It's just another task that can not only be hugely frustrating in solo, but just also not fun. It's kind of mind-blowing to think that a dev genuinely looked at what they'd created with the pest sacrifice and went, yeah, the fans are gonna love this one. They actually managed to prove to players that this aspect of the main quest could be done in a fairly entertaining way with the Meuchler section though, with the only annoying part being to get hold of the enemy's spine as mentioned previously. Because after that, the game of hide and seek that ensues is genuinely interesting and enjoyable, and the following mini lockdowns in the ritual room, although sometimes hugely challenging, are also a great step, so it's not all bad for this section. But tragically, it is a major problem for the map in my eyes, and one of a number of reasons that many COD Zombies players have absolutely no interest in jumping into this map or attempting to take on the Easter egg. Sadly though, the problems with this part of the Darkest Shore reach their climax as fans come to the final encounter. A huge portion of the community would probably agree that one of the most important and memorable things about a COD Zombies experience is a top level boss fight. And so I suppose the real question is, can the Darkest Shore be classified as an experience with one of these? No it can't. Okay, that might be a bit harsh. It's not the worst of all time by any means, but the whole concept of the fight sadly is very underwhelming. It consists of moving from one map location to another and battling with foes known as the Meuchlers, and what exactly are they, you ask? Literally just stupidly overpowered versions of the normal Meuchlers that are so unbalanced they are known for leading to thousands of smashed controllers. This boss fight is generally considered to be one of the hardest of all time. Now that's not necessarily an issue, but I'm referring to it being one of the most challenging when playing in a very competent squad. In terms of doing this thing on solo, good luck, because it's outrageously difficult. The Meuchler fight is completely unbalanced when playing on your own, meaning that even many of the best zombie players in the world have only managed to finish it on a handful of occasions when playing solo. And that right there should tell you all you need to know about how poorly thought out this final encounter actually is. To be clear, there is nothing wrong with a very demanding final boss in a COD Zombies experience. Veteran players definitely appreciate that level of challenge. But what fans don't appreciate is a battle that makes largely no sense gameplay wise and feels like certain aspects were included solely to make it barely possible to complete. A perfect example being having one part of the fight take place in the U-boat pens where there is zero access to an armor machine. So once a Meuchler has managed to obliterate your armor, which will happen very quickly by the way, there is no way for players to reacquire it until they make it to the next stage, which essentially isn't going to happen because they've got no armor. It's very much a ridiculous timeline of losing armor, not being able to rebuy armor till the next stage, and in turn not having the chance to get to the next stage to buy armor because you have none, and a Meuchler will wipe you out with a mere glance. And all of this is why you often see people running a very specific camping strategy in this boss fight, because good luck trying to do it any other way. It's a genuine shame that more time wasn't put in to make this thing more smartly planned out for solo players, because this fight is honestly unbearable outside of a squad. A long time before players even reach that point though, one of the most important things they can do in the Darkest Shore is get hold of the map's wonder weapon, the Ripsaw. Being totally truthful though, the phrase wonder weapon should really not be anywhere near this item because it is bad. Obviously it's needed for various Easter egg steps, but outside of this, to be honest, it's utterly pointless. I even think there is the possibility that it could be one of the worst wonder weapons of all time. The process to get hold of the Ripsaw is not necessarily bad. I mean, I've seen a lot worse. Harvesting spines and charging with souls is pretty simple and fairly interesting, but the major problem is the reward that it gives you at the end is just not worth it in any way, shape or form. It doesn't even really feel like a true wonder weapon, much more like a simple tool solely there to be intertwined with certain main quest steps, and that to me is not the point of these iconic weapons. The whole point of a map's wonder weapon is to give players access to something incredibly powerful or often out of this world. And sure, WW2 Zombies is grounded slightly more in reality than other entries into the franchise, so aliens shooting portals was probably always out of the question. But it didn't mean that this wonder weapon had to be so grounded in reality that it just ended up being boring and completely underpowered. When getting hold of something like this, fans are supposed to feel like they're just leveled up and been given a weapon that can't be rivaled by the others available in the experience, but that is definitely not the case here. Its only real positive is in the slightly earlier rounds you can use it to get easy melee kills and rack up some points, but as the rounds progress it's just not really a viable strategy for anything, and no smart player would ever be using this over the more powerful weapons at their disposal. There's no doubt that the Darkest Shore was hugely controversial upon its release for many different reasons that I've discussed, and realistically it still remains just as hated today by a huge number of players. But does it really deserve to be in the conversation for worst COD Zombies map of all time, or are players way too harsh on this experience? The only way to put it is the Darkest Shore is a complicated map, and not just in terms of its mechanics, I'm very much talking about whether it's good or bad. It truly feels like an experience of two halves, with it being responsible for some of the most unique Easter egg steps of all time, while simultaneously managing to produce some of the most frustrating main quest content in the history of the franchise. The devs managed to create an atmosphere to rival the creepiest of all time, with a map that's inhabited by a genuinely unnerving and devastating enemy, all while giving players access to one of the most pointless and boring wonder weapons that players had ever seen. It really feels like a combination that makes no sense. And the whole experience culminates in a boss fight that is realistically nearly impossible for a large portion of the player base unless they're playing with a very competent squad. The Darkest Shore is both confusing and frustrating with a lot of its design choices, and in some ways that is more annoying than an experience that is just straight up bad, because it showcases to fans that it had genuine potential, and if done more smartly could even have been a map that reached the great heights of the Final Reich. But with what players received all those years ago, there is absolutely no way that I could ever suggest that this was the case. There are small glimmers of quality that occasionally shine through when playing the Darkest Shore, and in my eyes it doesn't even come close to being one of the worst maps in the franchise. It's just kind of there as another World War II Zombies experience. It's serviceable, it continues the story of our celebrity cast and pushes things forward into future content with some positives, but just as many disappointing negatives. An overhated map in my eyes, but one that makes it extremely obvious as to why players hold such negative opinions towards it.